All right, everybody, welcome back to Brown and Browner, the April Fool's edition, if you will.
That's right. Today is April Fool's.
Not necessarily that we're going to be talking about anything foolish, but we'll talk about some fun topics here and go into the world of sports and the world of society and kind of intermix with all of
I
it.
guess I'll throw in, like, I think last night there was a big brouhaha. What was it? Detroit played
Yes.
the Minnesota Wolves, and there was a big fight. I don't know if that was last night or the night before, but there was
Yeah.
a big fight. And talk about some fools. Look, I get it. There's a lot of testosterone being thrown around, but at the end of the day, wait, didn't what was his name? I can't think of his name now. He played with the Lakers. Meta physics. What was his name?
Physics.
Ron Artest. I couldn't think of his nickname.
Meta World Peace, definitely not metaphysics.
Yeah, Meta World Peace. There's a guy who fought all the time, but he called himself Meta World Peace. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, just had to throw that in there for April Fools.
In the words of Martin Lawrence, he did not find woosah at all.
No, he didn't find the woo nor the sa. He was OC.
Speaking of the woo, be on the lookout for their new album this month. They're coming back.
They are coming back. They're gonna be out there like 50-year-old men going.
Red Meth.
Gotta love this Wu-Tang. No, I'm all about the woo.
On a sidebar, it's funny how society comes full circle because we're going back to appreciating some of the music we had in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, literally in this current moment with a lot of these folks and the beats that are coming back in.
I'm happy to see them do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have a hard time going to concerts, watching the old groups come back because they just don't sound the same. Plus, I feel like you buy some expensive tickets and all you hear are the people around you singing the song, and it's like, hold on a minute.
That's the one thing I don't like about going to a concert per se. I'd almost rather watch it or appreciate the music separately from that aspect.
I mean, you're one of the ones singing, so hey, that's what a concert's all about. Everybody's reminiscing, especially when you're watching an old group. So I get it. Just very expensive tickets nowadays, so you really don't want to. You want to get as much of your entertainment dollar as possible.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Indeed. Instead of feeling like you're doing karaoke because everybody around you trying to sing songs and they all forget half the words of the song anyway. So.
Nope. No. We'll get a little world of the music here too, because there's a notable I would call rapper or R&B artist on the LSU women's basketball team, Flau'jae Johnson, who prides herself on her music aside from basketball.
Flau'jae. Yeah.
But delving back into the world of sports, we'll kick it off with the hottest topic probably all this week, which is the NCAA Final Four, men's and women's. So with the men's, I mean, I think everything's chalk. What else are you going to say? Everything was expected as it was supposed to happen, I guess.
Well, first time since 2008 that all number one seeds made it to the Final Four. So definitely not something we've seen in quite some time. But I guess the parity that we think is in the NCAAs isn't there, at least not yet. Because even if you look at the final eight, there was only 1-2 seed that didn't make it.
Correct.
So and that was St. John's.
Yep.
So that's super chalk if you look at the NCAAs.
Yeah, and this goes back to that, the same topic we've covered before with the NIL. It's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out over the next few years, given the fact that, some of these bigger schools are always going to have the money and the clout, that's sitting there. And are they just going to continue to get these players because of the money and the clout they have? Or are we going to start seeing a little bit more parity where we can start seeing a little bit of the trend that we saw in the 2000s where the mid-majors were coming up and getting the talent, getting the coaching, getting everything else to kind of contend with the big boys and make these, Cinderella runs that we kind of appreciate and like as fans.
Well, we'll see. I think, you're going to have some guys who are sitting on the benches of these good teams. And no matter how much they win, if you aren't getting any tick, then you probably are looking to go somewhere else and try to get more playing time and exposure. Because let's face it, Every single player that's at this level has some type of aspiration of going to the next level. Now, only 1% of those will actually make it. You'll have some that'll go overseas and play. Because I remember when Tom Kleinschmidt, my brother, played with him, Gordon Tech, and he initially made the NBA, but all of a sudden he ended up playing overseas because, not everybody's as good as you may be, even in college. Not everybody's going to be a professional basketball player.
Well, and I think it's already kind of taken effect. And we talked about this last week where somehow they're letting the transfer portal start in the middle of the tournament, which doesn't make any sense.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of.
I forgot the exact stat I read yesterday or the day before, but just looking at major schools, Indiana lost its entire roster to the portal. Think about that for a second.
Wow.
Kansas has lost, I believe, at least 80%, being the fan that I am. And then I know that several schools out there are losing more than the majority of their entire roster to the transfer portal. So to your point, and to back up exactly what you just said, kids want their playtime. They're realizing it. I mean, yeah, you get the money, but guess what? You ain't seeing the court if you're loading up the roster.
Right. And there's no way you're going to make it to the next goal if you aren't getting that visibility and
the only counterpoint I've seen to that is, interestingly, in the upcoming NBA draft, I think 2 out of the top 5 projected players are coming out of Rutgers. Rutgers was, I believe, like 12 and 18 or some, subpar, record this past year in a not so strong bottom of the Big Ten because it was just so top heavy, obviously, with the Big Ten, with, the 6-7 schools that obviously were contending at the end here. But the fact of the matter is, if you've got 2 supposed top 5 picks in the NBA draft coming from supposedly the bottom team in your conference, how does that say about their playability? Maybe as teammates.
That could be part of it. I think, imagine this. What if they were in the Big East? Would they be where they are now?
Good question.
So, it might be better to be on the crappy side of the Big Ten getting that exposure versus on the better side, mediocre or better in the Big East.
Yeah, and that's definitely the other point is, even if you go play for whatever team it is in the big conferences with the big money, you're going to get the exposure. You're going to be on national TV every single night,
every
game, no matter what.
Even if you got to travel all the way to Oregon to play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go take that trip to the westward side. Yeah, exactly. So,
I mean, you know what? Like I said, I know we're talking NIL, but I think seeing the fact that the 4 number ones made it, and if you look at the type of game each one of them play, 2 of them, maybe even 3, actually, I think all 4 play a physical type game.
Yeah, this is I think where the 2 of us kind of differ on our picks too, and we'll get into that too. But yes, you are absolutely correct. There is a difference in style, at least between the 3, potentially 4 teams. And the matchups are interesting this time around. We'll start with the bigger matchup as far as I see it, is the Duke-Houston matchup. And, you got a Duke team with 5 or 6 guys that could spread the ball and literally score from all 5 positions. No questions asked. I think all 5 guys have the capability of taking over a game and putting up 20 any given night. That said, look at Houston's dynamic. They got 2 elite guards and 3 linebackers.
Well, and they play a physical style of defense. They slow the ball down. And this is why, unfortunately, I feel like Duke might beat them. We'll see how Duke shoots the ball. But Houston has a problem scoring points.
Yep.
And
their guards have to be hot in order to get up to the 80-90 range, which is what I think it's going to take to do.
And that's the point. And let's just be real. I mean, they got a little more height than Alabama had, but Alabama was scoring 90 plus every game. They ran into Duke and they scored less than 70.
Yep.
So that could be a problem. I'm rooting for Houston because I hate Duke. What was that? 30 for 30. I hate Christian Laettner. I still do hate Christian Laettner. All right.
Having Kentucky and understood the plight of Wildcat fans everywhere from 91 and 92. I understand the plight. I understand the hate. And I appreciate the global hate for Duke. And I'm rooting for Houston, but my money's on Duke.
If I had to bet on it, I'm betting on Duke. They have a legacy. And, part of hatred is jealousy, right? If anything, you have to tip your cap to a program that, you know, they're almost like UConn basketball in the women's, where you see them every year. I mean, if Duke isn't making the tournament and making it close to the Final Four, that's a seriously down year for that program.
And they honestly name a down year for Krzyzewski. Seriously, you know, the man has sustained eliteness as a coach. He handed it off to, I think, the right guy to sustain that level with John Shire, who's definitely a Chicago legend in basketball. From what I
and former player at Duke, he wasn't shabby, and look at what he's doing with these young kids.
Yep. So no, hats off to him. But yeah, I'm rooting for Houston, but I think Duke's got the firepower to kind of run that matchup.
Well, and what Duke also has is this. Well, besides the fact that they went from light-skinned brothers back in the Shane Battier, Grant Hill era to get some darker-skinned brothers like Zion, etc., they epitomize some of the things I don't like about college sports, and that's they lose a Zion. They lose what's the guy who plays?
Take your pick. I mean, yeah.
Well, but they lost like 2 or 3 guys who were from the same team. One of them went to New York. You know, you had Zion. And boom, they're right back in it because they're that perpetual machine that always gets the best of the best from the McDonald All-Americans, and they will always be good as a result.
One thing I will give Duke credit for, even though it's to my chagrin, because I feel like it kind of runs in a different direction in terms of where you get kids that have a little more hunger for basketball versus the kids that have the privilege and upcoming and honestly the resources to be better basketball players, which is what a lot of the Duke kids are if you look at their backgrounds. They're not the underprivileged kids. They're the kids that not only excel on the court, they excel academically because obviously they're going to academic school. So that there's definitely a bit to that versus they're not getting the kid out of the South Bronx, kind of thing, that grew up underprivileged or something like that. So there is a bit of eliteness that goes on when it comes to Duke. And yeah, they get the best of the best from the McDonald's team, if you look at it from that perspective. Absolutely. Which is kind of scary. At the same time, yeah, I mean, Krzyzewski and Shire, they created a pipeline in Illinois. Name the last time the best player in the city of Chicago or the city of Illinois went to an Illinois school. Well,
and that's been actually a problem since Ray Meyer and DePaul had those elite squads where they were just plucking kids from Simeon and all of these different, Southside schools, Westinghouse and such, and they created a powerhouse team. Here's the difference. They tried to stick to the idea of getting elite athletes that were also, good students. And none of these kids were that. Right. And it goes to the issue of education here in Chicago and the disparity when you talk about north side of Chicago and the curriculum in the public schools versus the south or the west side of Chicago and the curriculum that they have. So these kids were being pushed through for their talent, but it goes back to what I was saying, and we've talked about with why the NIL had to be, because you can't sit and tell me that a kid who reads at a 5th grade level but plays basketball like a pro is going to make it in the world based on academics. That's not where they weren't set up for success, because they were graduating high school, going to college, but they had a 5th grade education and could barely read and write. And I'm maybe embellishing that a little bit, but they weren't at the level that would lend to the success of being in college and being able to enjoy the experience and capitalize on the scholarship from an intelligence standpoint.
Exactly.
They weren't getting that. And DePaul's program failed.
Yes.
Duke, on the other hand, found a way to make that work, being able to find the best of the best inner city school kids who could thrive in a college atmosphere as well as play ball at an elite level.
Right. And I think that's definitely part of the aura of Duke. Unfortunately, they do have an elitist aura, and deservedly so, because of how they've built their culture and their program. So kudos to it. Yeah, we're all hateful of it and jealous of it just because of Christian Laettner and everything else that it stands for. But you got to be the best and you got to be hated. That's just how it works, you know?
Yeah, Christian, unlike many of the other Duke players that I liked, I think that they were good people. Christian Laettner was an ass. I'm sorry, he just was. He was like Bill Laimbeer's son. If Bill Laimbeer had a son, his name would be Christian Laettner.
That whole team had some smug players. You had Christian Laettner, you had Bobby Hurley, you had there was another big, tall, white kid on that team too that played on the following year. But they had a lot of smug basketball players on that team. I mean, yes, Grant Hill was even there, and yeah, some people call him smug too. You know. So no, there was.
They went from the light skinned brothers, you know, back in the 80s,
right.
90s, and then they got to start getting the darker skinned brothers now. But you know, again, they have created a program where even if they lose Cooper, they're going to be right back at it again next year.
Oh yeah,
they'll get another miracle freshman, you know, player that's going to and now so Cooper Flag. I thought so. What is the rule in the NBA now? So I know you can go from grammar school to high school to the pros. I know you could do that, but if you're in college, I thought you had to be there 2 years. Did they change that rule to 1 year now?
No, so it's different for football and basketball, funny enough. So yes, 2 years for football. It's still age 18 for the NBA. So first year of college, in essence, is what is required you need at least 1 year of post-secondary education, I believe is their technical definition. So you either go to college or you go to Europe or you go to a prep school, whatever it is, until you meet the mark. And then you finally can go into the draft. So yeah, it's one and dones. It's people that are going overseas for a year and jumping in like the Ball brothers or whatever, you know, stuff like that, basically.
Well, hold on though. Was LeBron 18 when he came out of high school? Because he didn't.
Back then. That was back then. Remember, the rules have changed 3 times in the last 20 years. So you had high school days in the 90s, right? So you had the Kobe's and the Garnetts that jumped straight out of high school. Then they changed the rule. I believe it was somewhere in the late 2000s, maybe. It was after LeBron. So, after that whole like 2002, 2003, whatever it was.
Yeah, it says implemented in 2005. NBA's eligibility requires that a player be at least 19 years old during the calendar year of the draft.
Yes, 19. So, I mean, that's what kind of forced Derrick Rose to have to do is, his 1 year of SAT prep.
1 year of finding somebody to take your test for you.
Yeah. So, like I said, they changed the rule a few times, but like I said, 19. I think both Knuppel and Cooper Flag actually entered college at the age of 17, believe it or not. So they were super young.
Yeah.
But they're going to be top 10 picks, both of them on Duke, and then honestly Tyrese Proctor is playing himself into stardom as well.
Playing some ball.
So, again, wealth of riches for Duke. So that's where I say like they've got 5 guys on the floor that could score at any time. I'm picking them. Academically over Houston. I want to see Houston win, but we'll see what happens.
So here's a question. Just I know going off on a tangent a little bit, but how at one point Duke and North Carolina were sort of equal in their talent and play within the NCAA. North Carolina has plummeted.
Well, I'll tell you what.
The perpetual fall. I don't understand it.
They went from having arguably one of the greatest coaches in college basketball, Dean Smith, and that entire coaching tree, if you will, because it emanated from the Larry Brown tree even before that. You had Dean Smith and everything else. Then you handed off the reins to Guthridge, who took over the reins. Bill Guthridge. No, Bill Guthridge was decent. I mean, he almost got a title, so you got to give him some credit. So Bill Guthridge, and then you said, okay, you know what? We got Roy Williams. So you got Roy Williams, you got Bill Guthridge. So you kept the pipeline alive and the aura of and the mystique of North Carolina basketball left enough to recruit by name to say, yeah, you're going to play Carolina basketball. Yeah, you're going to play for Guthridge or Roy Williams. But as soon as Bill Guthridge went away, and then you started getting these other coaches in that, frankly, don't have the cachet or the value of the historic coaches that I just named off, your recruiting plummeted. Probably.
Yeah, I mean, such a precipitous fall. I mean, and I don't understand how. Yeah, they get a big name coach.
Yeah, look at the big name
coach.
And that's what's frightening is how can you not lure a big name coach into a program? I think, and you're going to see this honestly at about maybe 3 or 4 or 5 schools that I can name off really quick over the next 10 years as these coaches retire or quote unquote age out. You're going to see it at North Carolina. And you've already seen it, obviously.
Yeah.
You're going to see it at Michigan State if Izzo doesn't have a successful job.
Right.
You're going to see it at Kansas if Bill Self doesn't have a coach
I'm
lined
sorry.
up.
Who? What? They're already going down. Hey, Bill Self, you selfless, you selfish self.
Haters.
I am a hater. Kansas is another one of those, just a hater. I hate Bill Self for what he did for Illinois, and I hate Bill Self because he's a jerk.
Think about what happened at Kentucky from the time that you had Tubby Smith and Rick Pitino until now. You had to undergo 3 or 4 other coaching changes when historically Kentucky had the Green Bay aura of less than a handful of coaches, if you think about it, you know. So after Tubby Smith, you brought in a couple guys here and there, and then you tried to fill the gap, and then you had to go back to your alums finally after being hitmen. So after having Calipari and only gotten 1 title in that entire stretch, mind you, you had to go back and find yourself an alum, Mark Pope, to resurrect the program again this year. So I think colleges need to figure out how to retain the alumni base they have and the aura they have from the coaching trees. And I think we'll do this in a different segment. The historical value and the prestige of having a coaching tree, I don't think is valued anymore. That's my thought anyway. You're losing that in a lot of different sports, in my opinion. Or the quality of that coaching tree is going down. It could be a factor of 2 things there.
I think it's some of the latter, and I'll say this, and I think you hit on this point. In football, I think it still exists. I'm not sure about basketball, but the top program, the Alabama, is the pinnacle. And I don't care where you're coaching, that's where you're trying to get to.
But think about that one too. You had Nick Saban there for all these years.
Yeah, I'm just using it as an example. I don't disagree with that. What's your point on that? Yeah. But the whole idea is that's what it used to be. That's what it was. You know, like Alabama was the pinnacle. You know, if you can get to Ohio State, if you can get to, you know, these certain programs, that was, I don't care where you were coaching, I don't care what your record was. If they came knocking on your door, you would open the door and you'd end up leaving in the car with them.
Absolutely.
In basketball, it just seems a little different. I do feel like it was that. That's why Bill Self went from Illinois to Kansas, etc.
Yeah.
But it seems as though you're not getting that same, like North Carolina, a great example. North Carolina by itself should always have one of the top 5 coaches just because it's North Carolina, but it doesn't.
Syracuse, Carolina, Kansas, Duke, Kentucky, Michigan State. I mean, there's the elite cream of the crop that I just named off in terms of coaching prestige that you would kill to be at as a coach, right?
Right.
Because you'll be given all the resources, you'll be given the cachet value of the name and everything else to recruit.
I don't feel like it's the same.
I think NIL is going to kill it, honestly.
That's probably true too, because as coaches move, and you still see some of that. Great example, McNeese State. The guys parlayed the success of this NCAA to be able to move to
NC State. Great job.
NC State, exactly. I even brought my man with him. Got a little support everything. Well, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. But I do feel like there's maybe that. I don't know. I don't. Are people coaching for life? Are people falling off? Okay, Sampson's been around for a long time. Shire is new. Pearl has been around for a long time.
Every one of those guys you named off have been in multiple schools. Nobody has stuck in school.
Yeah. But usually it's by scandal, though, isn't it?
For various reasons. I think Pearl, and you bring up a good example. So with Bruce Pearl at Auburn now, and with Kelvin Sampson at Houston, honestly, if those guys didn't get knocked for what they did at their prior schools for NCAA violation garbage,
right,
then yes, they would have been lifers at their school. I think.
Yep. I think that happened at Kentucky too. When you mentioned the Calipari, Pitino, those guys, you
I heard he
feeling
was
like
one
you
of the
need to
good
wash your
spots.
hands when you touch them. As good as they are at coaching, every time you touch them, you got to wash your hands.
You can't find me a single basketball coach in the entire world of college basketball that has his hands clean. Even if you want to claim Mike Krzyzewski, I'm sure some kind of underhanded shit happened with alumni at Duke to try to get some recruits. Don't get me wrong.
Well, I think some of it's shady anyway, right? Like what I was saying earlier about some of the academics. The academics are propped up for those students. I'm sorry, it happens at every university. It's just when you're really bad at it, you get caught.
Yeah.
I think in that regard, they're like baseball, where what was the famous quote about if you're not trying to cheat, you're not trying to win.
We'll
from
talk about
baseball mentality.
we'll talk about torpedo bats at another time. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, just looking at Duke, it's definitely the team. On the other side of the bracket, what do you think about the other side of the bracket? Auburn versus Florida, which honestly, I have one of those two teams winning on both of my sheets.
I'm seeing a split matchup, honestly, on both ends, because both teams, I think, match up well. Physically, I like Florida more. I think they are a stronger team slightly and given an edge there. And I think they're deeper to some degree than Auburn is in terms of bench depth. That said, the star player on both sides is an opposite end. So Janiah Broom's a front court player with a elite front. Walter Clayton is just a baller out of the back. So it's going to come down to a defensive matchup. And honestly, with both of these coaches, I don't know if they're really defensive coaches in the sense, because they're both offensive-minded coaches. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm picking – so on my sheets, I have Auburn. I think after watching the games over the last 2 weeks, I'm going Florida because of the depth and the physicality that they could bring to the game.
I'm going to go against something that I have one sheet, I have Auburn, one sheet I have Florida. I feel like, as you feel like whoever wins between Duke and Houston will win the championship. I'm on the other side of the bracket where I feel like one of those two teams will win. Initially, I thought Auburn as well, but I'm going to go against what I normally would say. Like when you're in the moment, it's about playing at that moment. But I feel like some of Florida's legacy is going to come in here too, and some of Auburn's legacy. Auburn have they ever won a championship?
Auburn has never won an NCAA championship. No.
Right. And has Sampson ever really won? Wherever he went?
Well, anywhere he was, no. He's never won a national title. No.
Right. Florida has a pedigree. Florida actually has, and isn't it an anniversary of that? I just feel
pedigree, yes, but there is no remnants of the Joakim Noah, Billy Donovan era.
True. But I feel like when you're walking, like for instance, when you're walking through the halls, when you're going to play,
sports success. I mean, that's just a school,
So I feel like that's going to be the factor, is that these kids are going to come in confident. Clayton, man, the guy, when you need a basket, that's the guy you get the ball to. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as I'd like to see it, but I feel like at the end of the day, Florida is going to be the more physical, more prepared team to win that game. And then I do feel like whoever wins that game, I feel like will beat Duke or Houston. Although that team is going to be a harder out.
Yeah, potentially that team could be fresher walking into the final, which would be interesting to see. Because I think you are going to see a physical battle in the Duke-Houston game.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you know what? I think also it might play a part in this. What is it? You play the Final Four, and then you get
Saturday and Monday.
Yeah, and then you get the Monday game for the championship, right?
Yep.
Are you going to be ready to bounce back after going through a battle?
Right.
And I think that's going to be, who's going to be the one that can handle it.
That has been a factor historically, if you think about it. I mean, the team that usually won, and I'm going to look at the stats of it, because I remember reading this a while ago. The team that usually won by the bigger margin in the semifinal usually ended up doing better in the final because of the quick turnaround and everything else. Really? I even go my own examples for Kansas. In the two games that they had in the Final Four semis, they blew out the teams, and that's why they won their 2 titles in 08 and 22, essentially. And they may have been fresher, they may have been deeper potentially. So that's where Florida could probably capitalize if they can get away with a win by 10, 15 points, whatever it is, potentially by over Auburn. They could be the fresher team walking in, honestly.
Yeah, and it's Auburn. I don't think Auburn's that deep.
They're not, and that's the reason I say, like, I knock Auburn, because yes, they went through a gauntlet of an SEC schedule. Yes, they've got a great team. Don't get me wrong, and Janai Broome is a great player and everything else, and Bruce Pearl's an excellent coach and everything else. But this Florida team, man, they're physical, they're big. They won the SEC tournament, mind you.
Yes, they did.
Late in the season against the very same competition we're talking about.
Yes, they did. That was the other thing, is that they won the SEC, not Auburn. But Auburn was, even after having a less than stellar few games at the end of the season, they were still given the #1 nod.
Right. And the overall #1, by the way.
Yeah, which is sort of surprising given the circumstances of Florida, and again their record at the end of the season. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. All I got to say is this is like the Super Bowl. People are going to be betting out of their minds on these games. I'm hopeful of this, that you got all of the #1 seeds there. Make these some good basketball games. I don't want to see a team I don't want to see Houston get blown out by 20 by Duke.
Right. I want to see a quality game. Yeah. I want to see a quality game both ways.
Yeah. And I feel like that could happen. I don't want to see Auburn or Florida get lose by 20. I want to see a good game that goes down to the last possession.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, with the men's game said, the women, we're not going to leave them behind. You know, they're at their Final Four. Last night they solidified their Final Four in that situation. We were all looking forward to a UConn-USC Elite Eight. Unfortunately, we did not get it due to the unfortunate injury with Juju. And frankly, you know, UConn walked away with the win. Yeah, they won by 10. At one point, I think they were up like almost 16, 17 points.
I thought they were up 20. Plus
maybe even 20. So, you know,
unfortunate. I think she scored 40 that game.
Yeah. Now, and like I said, I think this is something my colleague and I here were talking about before we start our chat here, is when you look at the women's game and you compare it to, say, last year, where you got a lot of pub, a lot of press, you got the Caitlin Clark effect, you got, you know, you got everybody all involved, and you got Reese, and you got everybody else, you know, all these
Caitlin Clark, Reese, you had you know, Clemson,
South Carolina by itself. Yeah, I mean,
no, not Clemson, I'm sorry, South Carolina. You had, I think Stanford was playing pretty well too at one point, which their star player sort of disappeared. You see her on commercials, but you don't hear her name in the NBA, WNBA.
So a big contention point, I think, in the media, and we've seen kind of publicly this year, is that some of these girls and some of these teams aren't getting the same love and press, if you will, that we saw last year for Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and everything else. Some would say that, some have argued that it may be due to race, which I find laughable. When you're comparing, say, Paige Beckers to Caitlin Clark.
What is the race thing? So Caitlin Clark is white too, isn't she?
Last time I checked.
So how could it be a race issue? This is just, you know, people talking out both sides of their mouth, just trying to, you know, provoke and you know, create something that isn't there.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I give Paige credit for, she had a terrible injury. She could have been Caitlin Clark because she was that good back then.
Yeah, it was Caitlin Clark last year, essentially. Her teed up to, yes, absolutely.
So now she has that, but you don't have that swell of all of these other things there too. She doesn't have somebody, and if anything, like, they purposely set up Angel and Caitlin against each other like that.
Yep.
But she doesn't have that.
Yep.
She's Paige. Who else is there? Were they going to try to make that her and Juju? When Juju's not there now, the girl from UCLA, as good as she is, that's not going to get you. So what are they talking about when it comes? It's not race. It's just that they don't have enough firepower to incite something.
They don't have that extra juice. And I think, you know, not to make it a thing about like looks and all that, but you had two attractive women between Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and everything else, and all the cachet and all the success of both programs and everything else going there. It's not to say that the girls this year aren't as attractive or anything like that. It's just that they're not as vocal. They haven't been marketed as strongly. I think that's another key piece. I think it's the marketing that really killed it, because you've got star players at a lot of different schools. TCU had Haley Van Lith, who went to 4 different schools, took 4 different teams to the Elite Eight, mind you. Successful little guard. LSU
had a press conference after the game yesterday. She had a really good press conference, and my hat is off to her.
Yep. LSU has Flau'jae Johnson, who's got a record deal off the court, as well as playing well on the court. So I mean, you got cachet and star power all over college basketball in the women's game, but they just haven't done enough to press it this year. And I don't know what exactly happened, honestly. I really don't, because you've got star players at UCLA, like you said. That's Jaime Jaquez' sister. I forget her first name. Gabriela Jaquez, I believe it is.
I thought her name was Betts.
Oh, that's the other one. There's 2 of them, actually. Sorry, there's 2 girls at UCLA that are actually solid. So that's the reason they have the
center that's killing everybody, scoring 30 a game. But do you know much about her? Are you hearing her getting a lot of visibility? Do you see her on commercials like Caitlin Clark? No, you don't.
Right. South Carolina, perennial contender because of their coach and what they do. They had a girl last year. I forgot her, Cardoso, the girl in Brazil.
She went over to the sky in the pros. Yeah. Yep. With Angel Reese.
This year, who's their star player? I couldn't name it, but you know what?
I can't name it either. Exactly. So again, I think that's on the people who are promoting women's college basketball. They're not doing the same job.
Well,
plus it wasn't as easy as it was with Caitlin Clark, because every night she was doing something spectacular. She was setting records. She was doing those things. It's easy to piggyback on that. They don't have that this time around.
Well, we'll talk about that too, because we were talking about this before we got onto this. So think about the quality of play too when it came to a couple of these stars. Caitlin Clark was a show, essentially. I mean, you knew she was a walking bucket at times, and where she was shooting from, how she was shooting, and more importantly, making all of her shots. This year, if you look at, like, let's say a Paige Beckers or even a Juju for that matter, these girls are just chucking up the ball. Yeah, Paige is scoring. Don't get me wrong. Paige is putting up 30, 40 points a game. No question. Yeah. Juju, I feel like sometimes she's just chucking the ball up from 3 because she can.
Because she can, and it didn't hurt her team as far as them winning. But then at the end of the game, it's like, yes, and Juju scored 25 points on 4 for 16 shooting.
Right, exactly.
You went to the free throw line quite a bit, but yeah, it's that kind of stuff too. And something I'll just say real quick, and I heard it on TV, and I thought it was a great point. Sometimes people forget, even with what I just said about Juju. Okay, she was 4 for 16, but how many times did she go to the basket and how many times was she at the free throw line? That's not a stat. So you don't see that as a stat. You just see them at the free throw line. But in essence, they were driving to the basket and potentially might have been able to score, but got fouled because you're supposed to not give up easy baskets.
You can't unfortunately market dribble drive. That's the unfortunate part. Dribble drive and score. I mean, that's what the girl's all about. She gets to the line, she makes her shots, she's going to score. That's just how she is, and that's a different game than what Caitlin Clark is. Angel Reese, similar kind of build. If you think about it, she's a post player. She's not one that's going to chuck up threes or whatever. She's a post player at the end of the day. So yeah, it's harder to market. We see that in the men's game. It's harder to market post man versus a guy that's chucking up threes like a Steph Curry at the end of the day.
Right, but Angel Reese marketed herself by the flair, how she dressed, and she was very vocal. And if they wanted to put up an argument of this, and maybe this may be the argument they're saying about racial piece to it, is that let's just be real.
Right.
It's easier to market a black player that's really good than maybe a white player that's really good.
I agree.
Would you agree with that statement?
I'd agree.
They got the flash, they got the flair, they got the style, they got the lip.
Yep.
Easier to market that. And then they went villain to hero with Caitlin Clark, and now they had that foil. They had all of the things in place, so that just blew up. And people were, and that part was racial, where you sort of had that divide of sort of the, I want this player, what that player.
Yeah, and that's where I think it takes a little bit of racial turn. So Angel Reese is a Baltimore product. She's a Maryland family. She comes from the inner city around here.
I'm from Baltimore. Why did you think you could make that last shot? I'm from Baltimore.
Credit given. That was the best question by a freshman ever given, honestly. It was awesome.
That's one of the best sound bites. Well, I loved it.
Hey, why do you think you got through this? Because I'm from Baltimore.
I'm from Baltimore. Without hesitation. It wasn't even like he thought it up. He was just like, I'm from Baltimore. You believe that.
This kid's got a t-shirt and a marketing deal coming even without No, that's Angel Reese, inner city background. Yeah, I was gonna say Angel Reese, inner city background, Maryland background. She played for a year at Maryland, then she went over to LSU and obviously made her image. What they initially called, which I thought had a little bit of racial overtone, we called her Bayou Barbie at first.
Yes, they did. Yeah. Yes, they did. What does that actually mean, huh?
I don't know. It was maybe the eyelashes. I don't know. But either way.
Well, you know what? I'm not going to knock it. And I think sometimes we, like we were saying about Paige and they're saying it's race. Sometimes we create these stories, right? Bayou Barbie was a beautiful doll, right? That people still admire. They got Barbie movies. Girls have held their Barbies for 50 years.
Yep.
Bayou is because they're down in New Orleans.
Yeah, New Orleans. They speak a different brand down there.
Yeah. I'm surprised that the makers of Barbie didn't come up with the Bayou Barbie.
Think about that marketing.
So I'm not going to knock that, and I'm not going to say it's a undertone racial. I think we need to get away from that. Don't get me wrong. For centuries, we allowed these things to happen, and nobody said anything, and they were wrong. Just like some of the things against women and misogynistic things that went on, we just sort of turned the cheek and let the boss slap you in the ass, and it was okay. No, it wasn't. But we got to stop turning molehills into mountains.
Right.
Got to stop that.
Yeah. Nope. Totally agree. So no, I think like I said, I think our central point here is that the marketing value behind college basketball for women this year hasn't been what it was last year, and frankly, I think it's also translating up into the WNBA ranks, which they're undergoing a contract dispute right now. Yes, Angel Reese has been front and center of some of that argument, and valid points. However, the counterpoint is that the WNBA doesn't make money. I get it. I understand. It's a business at the end of the day. Professional sports are a business. We know this.
Right. We're in America, and how many professional sports will survive any amount of time if they're not making money? Yes, the WNBA got a nice shot in the arm with Caitlin Clark, but that's going to plateau. And I'm sorry, we're in capitalism.
Yeah, you got to start at the base and push the marketing up. Like that's how it works. So that's where they failed this year, to keep that, like you said, plateau, and now maybe even a downward slope. Unfortunately,
It's always been it, and I love to see women play sports. I love that they have the kind of quality and technical aspect that you see within the guys' game. Actually, sometimes even more so, because in the guys' game, everybody's shooting threes, and you see women's game, there is an inside presence. Asia Wilson, how many times she win the MVP? Yeah. So I think that their game is where it needs to be, but the reality is this: who's paying money to go watch it?
Money, yeah, exactly. Yep. You got to put.
I've seen one maybe women's game. I'm talking about in person.
Yeah,
that's what counts at the end of the day.
Yep. No, I don't disagree. And they've got to do a much better job strategizing and marketing the women's game. I understand that most of these WNBA teams are in major cities. Most of these girls don't come from the major cities. Have you thought about that? Like, imagine taking Angel Reese and having her play basketball here in Baltimore. I'm sure every girl would line up just to watch that game. If you put Caitlin Clark and do a couple of games in Iowa a couple of times a year, boom, you got 50,000 fans showing up. No questions asked.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There's little things the NBA and the WNBA can do to improve that aspect for fans to want to go to a game, increase their revenue and everything else that's behind it. But frankly, they haven't done a great job with it. And that's what's really costing not just the product on the court, but unfortunately, it's harming the development of the women's game in that sense.
I think you made a good point there. Like, maybe 1-2 games. Hey, you could take a home game and make it in Iowa.
Yep. Yeah.
You can take a home game and make it in Baltimore.
Yep.
They got stadiums there.
Oh, yeah. No, like I said, if you utilize the marketability of a player to the benefit of your grander sport, which is what we've always done in men's sports, if you think about it too. It's not like we went back and went to their hometown and stuff like that, but we've capitalized on their image. We've capitalized on their ability to meet the masses one way or the other, right? For every player that's been out there. Michael Jordan is a Chicago icon, obviously. So what do? When in the 90s, you had Michael Jordan restaurants. You had, a whole bit of branding going on in different facets to help that, image and likeness at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, his stayed and continued to stay. I wonder if they did that for Caitlin Clark, if they or Angel Reese. I'm sure they probably have something in the mix right now. But if they open a restaurant, how long would that restaurant have that notoriety?
I'm not saying a restaurant the best way, but okay, so let's take it even more fundamental. So you got shoe deals. Obviously, Jordan was a brand unto itself with Nike and everything else, and that's a icon and legendary status. Yep. Kobe also kind of got brought in. So you got the Kobe brand of basketball. But then guess what? Every single pro player, whether it's men or women these days, are under those two labels. They're under the Kobe brand. They're under the Jordan brand. So they're not getting their full potential of their namesake or whatever it is you call it at the end of the day, under any of these labels or shoe brands. So that there's a level to it when it comes to not getting the popularity and the ability to market as heavy as what they used to do in the 90s and 2000s. But, that's something the NBA has to figure out and overcome. By the way, on the side note, I've got, Get Up on the side here. And I just noticed that they got snow showing in Green Bay, Wisconsin this time of year. And yes, wow. The NBA NFL draft is coming up here shortly.
Wow. Thank goodness it's not snowing here, but it's cold in Chicago. So, right. One thing I wanted to point out this year, and it almost happened, with the exception of USC on the women's side, you have 4 number 1 men teams making the Final Four. And it's more likely to happen in the women's game. I'm sorry, but you had 3 of the 4 number 1 seeds make it. The 4th number 1 seed lost to the Connecticut, the 2nd seed. So they got 1-1-1-2, and the men has 1-1-1-1. I think more chalk exists in the women's game than in the men's game. There's less parity there. But I found that very interesting that these high-profile programs are the only programs left, standing at this time of year. So just pretty interesting to see that. And honestly, I feel like it's going to be South Carolina again.
I think it's going to be South Carolina. Remember, at the end of the day, we are talking about team sports. Yes, I understand that there are teams out there with 1 to 2 good players out there and everything else. UCLA, I think those are the 2 strongest teams per se on paper. Where they've got a 1 through 5 that could play well together, and that's how the women's game works, in my opinion, historically. So, generally, I think you're going to see, if we go by history, what Dawn Staley has done to build that machine at South Carolina cannot be discredited in any way. It is amazing to watch every year.
Well, now finally, what's his name from Connecticut, Oriema, finally has real competition. Like there was competition with Tennessee and their coach.
Pat Summit had her time.
They used to be that standard, right? Well, Connecticut, what have they made like 27 of the last 28 Final Fours or some crazy stat like that?
Right.
But I think Dawn has taken that and now created that here at South Carolina, or at South Carolina, not here at South Carolina. And I wonder for how much longer she's going to coach there, but she could be that next Pat Summit.
Yes, I agree. No, you've named off, I think, arguably the 3 greatest coaches in college, in women's college basketball. Tara Vanderveer, obviously, the other exception.
Yes.
Stanford.
Yes. Give her credit too.
No, there are cool legacies in coaching when it comes to women's basketball, but right now the standard is Dawn Staley. No questions asked.
Well, and the difference is the latter 3 are all winners.
Yep.
So, and they've won a sustained run of winning, not just a little bit, not one hit wonder. Yeah. So you got to give them credit. Again, I'd like to see a really good women's game. And I'm hopeful that somehow when the women's professional game can get a little bit more notoriety and visibility, and they can figure out a way to stimulate more viewership to keep that product going.
Nope, absolutely. Now
What
that's
else do we have quickly before we sign off? You got anything?
I know the NBA season's still in effect right now. We're getting down to the final games here, but let's take a look at those Celtics and let's take a look at that Thunder. 6-game winning streak for the Celtics, 10-game winning streak for the Thunder. Thunder are about to win 70 games potentially in a season, which is pretty impressive, even with all the history going on and all that.
Yep.
We're talking about a young team, lots of super studs, and yes, probably the MVP of the league, SGA, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I just have to say this. Kevin Durant twisted his ankle last night. He might be out for a game. He's gone into obscurity playing, on the Suns. He's in that Dick Sports commercial where he goes, come on, kid. He even sounds like a jerk in his commercial. I'm sorry, but let's just think about this for a second. Michael Westbrook.
Russell Westbrook. Yeah.
What's that? Oh, I call him Michael Westbrook. Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah. Lakers, Colorado. But you got Westbrook, you got the beard, and you got Durant.
Yeah.
They're all still in the league. And how many of them have won a championship since they left Oklahoma, besides Durant with the Golden State Warriors?
Yeah, they also had Serge Ibaka on that team.
That's right. They sure did. And fast forward now, 15 years, and look at what they're doing now with these young kids.
Yep.
I even like the commercials that Shea has with the young center that they got.
I have to give my hats off to the entire Oklahoma City organization from basically going on a huge ascent with what you just named off. They had their chance. They even were up in the Western Conference Finals, couldn't capitalize and got
3-1.
Lost their guys, rebuilt the program literally from scratch, if you think about it, because they didn't have any star players whatsoever.
No, they didn't have anybody.
Trading, drafting, you name it. I mean, that guy did a hell of a job, their manager and their owner, to make that happen. Now look what they got. They got a 10-year success run built in this team, in my opinion. Provided everybody stays, it's going to be pretty cool to watch.
Well, and that's usually the toughest thing, is to get everybody to stay, right? Because everybody wants to get paid, and at some point, you sort of max out on what you can pay, right? Because they got to give Shea his money.
They're going to give Shea his money. They're going to get Chet his money. They're going to get Dort his money. They're going to have a lot of people money. Don't get me wrong.
Well, you got Jalen. You got Jalen Williams, who's busting the trays, who's hitting, who plays forward, plays good D. They got 2 Jalen Williams. Yep. They got one with a J-A-L-E-N, one with a J-A-Y-L-I-N. But to me, the guy that makes them roll besides Shea is Chet. And where did Chet Holmgren play college?
Chet played at Gonzaga, baby.
So, I mean, they got a nice young nucleus. They've already gotten a taste of the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
They could be on a run for, like you said, a decade. If they can keep enough of those pieces there. I just laugh at the fact that Kevin Durant couldn't do that. He chickened out and went and joined the team that beat him.
Never been a team player at the end of the day.
No.
Never been a team player in a team sport, so this is what it cost you.
Well, and he was great at Texas and everything, but did they win at Texas?
No, they lost first round.
Hello?
I got good stories on that one, because Kansas beat them twice after Texas was up at least 15 points in the field house and at Texas, and Kansas beat them that year, because that was the year Kansas won the title in 08.
I just feel like Kevin Durant has never been anything but a skinny outside shooter who's 7 feet tall, whatever, 6'9", 6'10". Not a great defender. You never heard him being all NBA defense or any of that. And don't get me wrong, there was a time when maybe he was the best player in the NBA while LeBron was in the NBA. But boy, talk about not reaching your potential, not being a winner, not being a leader. And he doesn't want to be a leader. He just wants to be a guy on a team that they give the ball to all the time, but he doesn't want to be a leader.
Yep, exactly.
And that's why you're Kevin Durant and why you're not doing anything.
That's why you're Kevin Durant, and that's why you're only going to end up with your one title. That's why you're James Harden. You're not going to have any titles. That's why you're Russell Westbrook. You, I guess, could win did you win a title last year with the Nuggets or with the?
No,
Oh, not yet, not yet.
Nuggets didn't win it last year. Boston won it.
Yeah. So yeah, you're never gonna get. If you're not gonna be a team player and get those other players around you to want to be with you, you'll never win a title in the NBA.
Well, and it's funny naming those three players, and I brought that up for a reason. OKC looks like a team that can really go to the finals and take it to a team and can be a perennial contender. They play like a team. Shea may get his points, but if you watch them, they throw the ball around. They do the Celtic thing, right?
They're not 5 deep. They're 10 deep. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
They're a team.
So you look at them. Now, look at the three players that I brought up.
Yep.
They're not team players. They all want to be. And the funny thing is, and I see why they broke up. The three of them together in the locker room, Harden was young and he was the sixth player kind of guy. So he didn't have the kind of voice he has now.
Correct.
But Russell is a super jerk. Like, he's more of a jerk than Durant. I'm sorry. Russell is like the guy you don't want to go out and party with because you know you're going to end up in a fight. That's that's why they weren't successful.
Here's more indictment for Russell Westbrook for you. Russell Westbrook in college played at UCLA with Kevin Love and did not win a title.
That's right. That's right. But he's a selfish player. You know what? There are certain players. I think one got away with it. Antonio Brown in football. He got away with being that cancer in the locker room because of his extreme talent. Russell Westbrook also had that talent, but he was such a jerk. Nobody really wants to play with him. I'm surprised Denver picked him up because the fact they picked him up means they will not win a championship this year because Russell's not a winner.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Russell Westbrook broke a ton of records with the whole triple-double average and MVP and all that stuff that he had. But you know what? 30 years down the road, I ain't gonna remember it.
No, plus those are individual accolades.
Individual accolades, exactly. Yep.
So great. You're the triple-double king. So it does mean that you were sharing the ball, but it also means that you had the ball a lot. And when it really mattered, he shot the ball like Rondo outside of like 8 feet.
Right.
You got him outside of 8 feet, you didn't even have to stick him because he couldn't hit the basket.
Yep.
And Durant is that selfish player. Hey, I'm going to quit on my team. We were up 3-1 and we could have beaten them, but we didn't because I suck. And I'm not a leader. Let me go over to a ready-made team that just won the championship and just beat us, and let me get my championship so somebody can keep my name in the record book somewhere.
Well, and even then, you're up 3-1 against the Cavs. Your best player, one of your best players, Clay, goes down, and you can't step up and win the damn game. Come on, man. Seriously. Like that's my
not
biggest
Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant isn't that player.
Right.
As good, as talented as he is, and I'm sorry, most of his talent comes from the fact that he can shoot the ball and he's 6'10" or whatever.
Well, yeah, it's because he's slender shady. I mean, nobody can reach him at that height and that,
But, I'll take Dirk Nowitzki over him.
Oh, yeah, Dirk for me, Dirk and Tim Duncan. Two of the biggest to play that position in that same manner and do better than what, obviously, Durant did. No question.
Yeah. So, bye-bye, Durant. You'll be out of the league soon.
Yeah. Now, that said, I love the Thunder in the West. People are going to talk about the Lakers, obviously, because of Luka and all that. Nope, I'm still picking the Thunder. The only team that I could see viable against the Thunder is the Nuggets. I love the Nuggets. I've loved the Nuggets the last 3 years. I think they've got a great team. And boy, that Joker dude is just cool to watch.
I'm sorry, Joker is the baddest player. You know what? It's funny because I was talking with my brother the other day, and he actually had NBA talent. He just got derailed by women, and and his head how good he was, and getting ink in the paper. But Joker is just amazing.
Him and Jamal Murray don't give a damn.
The NBA. Well, it's funny because he's the best player in the NBA and has been, won the MVP. He should have won the year that Embiid cried his way to an MVP. Yeah. But it's like he still doesn't get that respect. I don't know what it is, but he just doesn't get that respect.
It's two reasons, and I hate to bring up the race card, but one, that he's white, and two, he's not quote unquote American. But I'm sorry, but this dude is just the best basketball player in the freaking league for the size that he is. There's nobody. Look, I think just this week alone, I've watched 2 highlight reels of him making no-look passes across the court.
That was amazing. He throws full-length court passes, taking the ball out, hits it on the money like a quarterback. The guy could get you a triple-double every night, no problem. And he's a center. He's a center. Remember that. The NBA hasn't worked through a center in how long?
In forever. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No. And it's frightening to think that both him and Jamal Murray literally don't give a damn. And that's what really makes him special, honestly.
If Jamal can stay consistent, I think they're the biggest contender to the Oklahoma City Thunder.
The Nugget have the coolest core over there. They've got, they got Jamal Murray leading at point. They got the Joker in the middle. They've got Michael Porter Jr. who can hit the three when you just kick it out to him here once in a while. You got
Gordon too. They've got Gordon too.
Got Aaron Gordon as a swingman, and then you got like guys like my boy from Kansas playing sixth man. I mean, I'm telling you, they've got like a cool dynamic of role players to make it work, basically. And that's where, like I said, that's probably your biggest threat in the West to a potentially deeper Thunder team. But outside of that, I mean, yeah, you got Steph Curry and the Warriors, but no, you can't beat anybody in a game of 7 games like a Thunder team or a Nuggets team with just one player.
People are saying that. People are saying Jimmy Butler's doing that for him. I don't believe it.
Himmy, I'll see it when I believe in the playoffs. It does Himmy, and I keep saying Himmy because he's him in the playoffs. We know this.
Yeah, and that's a problem. Like
that dude shows up when it counts. That's the difference.
well, like he reminds me of Russell Westbrook. Look at how he's left Minnesota, Chicago, Philly, and now Miami. The guy's never satisfied, and the guy he's like a fucking petulant kid that you have to keep placated by giving them what they want. Otherwise, they turn into a monster.
At one point, we used to respect him to the fact that we used to think that he was the lost child of Michael Jordan, but obviously that's not the case.
No.
that is truly the Ant-Man now.
Oh, have you seen, just real quick, they need to get rid of this commercial. Speaking of gym shoes, I think, I don't know what his brand is, Ant-Man, but he gets into a car and they start playing some song by somebody, a female singer, and they start singing. Oh my God. I hope they did it in one take because he sounds so bad. It's just so bad. Like I have to turn down the volume because it just is so bad.
That is one guy. I like the ego. I like the swag. He's still young. He's still got to prove himself a little bit. Again, he could turn into a star, but unless he learns to play with his team, again, same situation as a Westbrook at the end of the day, just louder, unfortunately.
Well, I think he's a nicer guy than Westbrook.
He's nicer. He seems nicer. He seems
but
nicer.
It's funny because he got rid of Towns, and he got Randall, and they got worse.
Yeah, well, I mean, Minnesota's not exactly set up to win, in my opinion. I don't think they're the right mixture of players there to make it all work.
I think you're right. Yeah. And honestly, just looking at it, because I know we're running out of time here. I can see it being OKC versus the Celtics.
Yep.
Or OKC versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. I
like the
Cavaliers have the best record in the NBA, or did at one time.
Cavs are what I call the Thunder Light. They're not as deep, but they have that same team makeup with studs at the top 5 positions, basically.
Yeah, and Mobley's playing his potential now. So they could be a tough out for Boston in the East. Yeah. Boston has had the luxury of not really having any competition in the East. Embiid and the Sixers faltered because Embiid is the biggest crybaby. Where did he go to college? Kansas.
Exactly. Didn't even count. He played 3 games with us. Yeah.
And then the Heat sort of faltered. Milwaukee it was either injuries or something that always seemed to derail them since they won the championship. And who else is in the East to really give them any competition?
I haven't seen Dame being able to wear his watch ever since he came to Milwaukee and being able to go like that. I ain't seen Dame time. I ain't seen the Rolex in a while.
Well, he's out, right? He's been out for a while.
Been out for a while, and then you got John. I'm surprised they can't do better in Milwaukee, but they got to figure it out over there. And then, of course, the one team you didn't even mention that everybody, I'm sure, in New York City area is crying about, that they're thinking, oh, we're going to be the next coming of Jesus. Well, guess what? Knicks, you ain't winning. Still, Willis Reed is the best one yet.
No, I'm sorry. We were just talking about this too. I felt like remember the Knicks haven't won since like Phil Jackson was on the Knicks with what's my man, the senator's name? I forget the senator's name. That was in the 70s, early 70s, right? That was the last time they won.
Yep.
They've had some talent, but they always seem like Pat Riley gooned them up, thought that gooning them up, they could be like the Detroit Pistons. Didn't work.
It almost worked in the late 90s, but then it failed.
It almost worked, but unfortunately, they didn't take advantage of the non-Jordan era.
Correct.
The 2 years that Jordan was out, they didn't even make it to the finals. They didn't make it to the finals one of those 2 years, and Houston won both of those years.
Well, one of those
they
years,
lost to Reggie Miller on the Patrick Ewing finger roll. Remember that?
They lost to Reggie scoring 8 points or 10 points in 8 seconds or whatever the hell it
was. Still, we were talking about it because the Bulls did that to the Lakers, but Reggie did it all by himself on New York. That was so beautiful. And he was going up to Spike Lee and he was doing this. You gotta love it. See, that's when sports were really. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know I'm an old school guy, but I just
that's
felt like
how
there was a lot more. What's that?
That's how it should be, in my opinion.
Me too. It shouldn't be penalized when you do that.
Yep.
That's part of the sport. The best part of, like I'm learning so much more about Larry Bird. I loved him. I always felt like he was one of the best. I still feel like he's one of the best 5 players. And he couldn't jump this much off the ground.
Yep.
But the guy had heart. He had smarts. And he could get into someone's head like Dennis Rodman. I'm hearing some of the stories about him talking smack on the basketball court. Oh, my God.
Yep.
Oh, when he says, look, why don't you put a black guy on me?
Yeah. I know, right? That's great. I remember that.
Harry. You may have been a jerk, but you were a funny jerk.
Yeah, no kidding.
They have some stories. If you go on like TikTok or something, one of those things, they have some stories where they're little Larry Bird stories, and the guy, Vernon Maxwell tells one. There are a couple others, and they're like, Larry Bird would tell you exactly where he was going to shoot it, when he was going to shoot it, and no matter what, you couldn't stop him.
It was like watching the Prince skit from Chappelle. It's like, shoot the J, shoot it. Okay.
Oh, speaking of Dave Chappelle, if you haven't seen it, there's some pretty good Dave Chappelle new stuff that's out there. I've been catching some glimpses of it, and Dave Chappelle is funny as heck. I'm sorry. He pushes the envelope.
If there is a bucket list item, if you're a fan of comedy in any form or fashion, you must go to a Dave Chappelle show. I had the privilege of going to one 2 years ago, and I'd say it's the best comedy show I've been to in my life. No questions asked.
I was going to take my son. They were out in like Tinley Park or something. I was going to take my son, and I was going to buy like a suite, not a suite, but nice seats. The day before that concert, he was somewhere, I want to say in Carolina, and he got razzed a little bit by the audience. Yes. And he literally said, you know what? I'm going to get paid regardless. So I'll just sit here and you can razz me and I'll just sit here. And he literally sat on the stage for like an hour and a half and did nothing.
Yep.
And I was like, you know what?
I get it.
And I'm sorry for that. I'm also sorry that I didn't go see James Brown when I got a chance. Sorry, George Carlin died after I had tickets to see him at the Chicago Theater. The Kings of Comedy came into town, and Eddie Murphy's brother, Charlie Murphy, he passed away. He got sick the first time and then passed away. I don't know. I got some bad luck when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, no kidding. Don't curse these couple of these guys. Now there's some good comedy out there right now, but like I said, Dave's still the king as far as that goes. I mean, I'd say definitely go see him if you get the chance. Yes, I get the story that you just told, obviously, is unfortunate in its own right, but
it was bad timing because I was ready to see him because he was funny and he was at the height of his career. To see him. Yeah.
Yep. No.
One quick one. I'm talking about comedians. Do you remember Mitch Hedberg?
Oh, heck yeah.
That guy had that simple, sort of matter-of-fact approach. He was funny as hell. I was on a golf trip in Florida. We were sitting and we all got up late because we went and partied after we played, and it was like 11 o'clock. We were watching Comedy Central. This guy just nailed it every time. And with the little bass in the background, a little jazz bass sound. I saw a young lady. Just another quick thing to that. We went to see him out in Vernon Hills at the Zanies out in Vernon Hills. Yeah. It was one of the worst stand-up performances I ever seen. It's like this guy was super funny, but that night I think he smoked some hash plus some weed because he started the act off. He stood behind the curtain And he started telling his jokes behind the curtain, and they were horrible. Like, like his kind of humor is sort of dry and
Yeah,
sort of, and if you're not hitting, you're going to be bad. And he wasn't hitting that night. And I was with, we're 10 deep, and all of us got so pissed. We walked out. I was like, oh my God. I saw a lady down at Zany's in Chicago on Wells Street a couple weeks ago. She had that same Mitch Hepburn kind of thing.
Yeah.
But she nailed it. She was really, really good. I can't think of her name right now. A friend of ours really likes her and follows her. But she was really pretty amazing. Let me see if I can find her name real quick just to give her a little shout out there.
The other guy I like right now that I'd like to go see at some point would be Andrew Schultz. That guy's nailing it right now too.
Yeah. Was she?
He was on Netflix, I think, just about maybe a
Okay,
week
that's
or two.
what it was. Yeah. So let's see. Chicago. She was also from Chicago. I was trying to get her name. Gosh darn it. I can't. You know what? I'm not the best searcher. I sometimes I feel like I'm right on the cusp of being a Luddite.
Yep.
What month is this? This is March. All right. You know what? I'm not going to waste anybody's time. We'll get to it next time. I'll get her name and get it out there. Is there anything else we got to talk about before we go?
No, I think, like I said, we got basketball. We got, it's the start of baseball season. But we'll get to that conversation separately on the whole torpedo bats, if you will, and everything else going on in baseball and all that good stuff. But,
I saw the torpedo bats, but they say that it's legal.
Completely legal. Yeah, it's 100% legal. It's well within the rules. No questions asked. I have no problems with it. Frankly, I'm surprised that somebody didn't do it earlier because you're supposed to take advantage of the rules and win whatever way you can in whatever sport it is. In golf, they do it all the time with the crafting of clubs. I call it what they did in baseball, and I'll make this really short, with the torpedo club, is do nothing more than what we do with a golf driver or a golf iron that creates a bigger sweet spot in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody just applied it to baseball and said, okay, it's within the rules. Yeah, it's within the 2 point whatever inches of diameter. Done.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if it's within the rules and they have some strict rules on the diameter, the length, and everything, I mean,
yeah,
unless it's like filled with aluminum.
Yeah. You cork it in Yeah, exactly.
Hey, by the way, her name was Emily Catalano. So if you ever get a chance, check her out. Yep. She was totally Mitch Hepburn, just female version, and she was really good.
Nice. I gotta check that out.
Yep. Well, partner, always a pleasure.
Yep. Nope. This has been great. We'll pick this up. I think maybe on Monday, right before the national championship. I think we'll see if we can do a little weekend. We'll be leading right into the Masters next week. By the way, one of our. I'm
looking forward to that. Although I don't have a pick yet, I got to start doing a little studying because I do want to put couple of bets down on the Masters. And I don't think it's going to be Scotty Scheffler. I feel like Scotty Scheffler has fallen a bit from his putting to his ball strikings. Not quite what it's been.
I agree. There's a little bit more open field this time. It's going to be fun to watch. And we'll see where the picks are. I don't think it's going to be any of the heavy guys, though. I don't think it's going to be Scheffler. Definitely not McIlroy. Definitely not Thomas. I'm going something like a Morikawa, possibly. We'll see where it goes.
I'm going with, although he didn't show up, he hasn't really been playing well this year, is Schauffele. Xander shows up for the big tournament.
He can ball. Yep, he can ball. No question. Yeah. But no, we'll pick it up next week with a little golf pickup and a little national title talk and kind of go from there then.
All right. Well, be well, my friend. Enjoy. For everybody out there, just remember to make the world a better place. Make a friend that doesn't look like you, and you may change the world.
Appreciate that one. That one's perfect. Thanks, guys.
All right. Talk to you, bro.